Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be completely alone in the world when you're only 8 years old? Can you imagine being used as human bait by criminals, while no one in the world even knows you exist? The story I'm about to tell you kept me up at night for weeks. A Chinese boy was used as bait by gangs for years, but 9 years later, he managed to find the only police officer who dared to save him. What he discovered about that encounter will break your heart, and then fill it with a hope you didn't know you needed. Tell me in the comments. Has a stranger ever done something for you that changed your life forever? Zhang Wei was only 6 years old when his world collapsed like a sandcastle. It was 2012 in the outskirts of Guangzhou, a city growing so fast it was swallowing entire villages like a monster made of concrete and steel. His mother had died in a factory accident, and his father, a construction worker with more debt than hope, made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He sold his son to a child trafficking ring for 5,000 yuan, less than $800. Wei remembers the night they took him. The smell of cheap cigarettes and fear filled the rusty car they shoved him into. His tiny hands trembled as he looked out the back window and watched his father walk away without ever looking back, crumpled bills shaking in his hand. "Dad doesn't love me," the boy thought, not knowing those would be the last innocent words to pass through his mind for a very long time. The men who bought him belonged to a criminal organization known as the Golden Crows, specialized in using children for illegal activities. Wei was taken to an abandoned building in the industrial suburbs of the city, where around 20 other children of similar ages were living in conditions that would make any parent in the world cry. The group's leader, a man named Snake Chen, named after the snake-like scar across his face, had a perfect system. The children were trained as human bait for thefts, pickpocketing and drug trafficking. Wei, with his angelic face and big sad eyes, quickly became the organization's favorite tool. Can you imagine a 6-year-old child being forced to cry in the street just to distract victims while others robbed them? Wei learned to act with heartbreaking skill. He could cry on cue when needed, because the tears were always there, just under the surface, waiting to be released. For 2 full years, Wei was used in dozens of criminal operations. The criminals dressed him in torn and dirty clothes, taught him English phrases for foreign tourists, and placed him on strategic corners of the city. "Please help me, I'm hungry," he would say with a voice that shattered hearts, while his older brothers emptied wallets and purses of those who stopped to help him. Wei developed a near-supernatural ability to read people in seconds. He could tell who had money by how they walked, who was a tourist by their shoes, who was vulnerable by the way they held their bag. This skill, forged in the most dangerous streets of Guangzhou, would save his life years later. But in October of 2014, when Wei was 8 years old, everything changed in the most unexpected way. That rainy afternoon, Wei was performing his usual act in People's Square, pretending to be lost and hungry to draw in victims. He had learned that rain made people more compassionate, more willing to help a wet, shivering child. What he didn't know was that he had caught the attention of someone very different from his usual targets. Officer Liu Zhengming was a 15-year veteran of the Guangzhou police force. At 35, he'd seen it all: murders, thefts, domestic violence, drug trafficking. But something about this child disturbed him deeply. For 3 days in a row, Liu had observed the same pattern. The child appeared, someone approached to help, and mysteriously that person would be robbed just minutes later. Liu was the father of a boy the same age, and something in his paternal instinct was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The 4th time he saw Wei in action, he decided to step in. He approached the boy with a firm but calm stride. Wei, trained to spot police from a distance, immediately activated his escape routine. But Liu did something no adult had done in 2 years. He knelt down to the boy's level and spoke to him like he was his own son. "Hey, little one," he said with a gentle voice that contrasted with his intimidating uniform. "My name is Liu. What's your name?" Wei, confused by the genuine kindness in the officer's eyes, didn't know what to say. He had been trained to lie about his name, his age, his past. But something in Liu's gaze completely disarmed him. "Zhang Wei," he whispered, saying his real name for the first time in 2 years. What happened next was like a movie in slow motion. Lou noticed the marks on the boy's wrists, the poorly healed scars on his arms, the way his eyes constantly scanned for escape routes. But more than anything, he noticed something that hit him like a punch to the gut. Wei had the same expression his own son had when he had nightmares. "Wei," Lou said, "are you really hungry?" The boy nodded, and for the first time in months, he wasn't acting. Lou took him to a nearby restaurant and ordered enough food to feed 3 adults. While Wei devoured the dumplings like it was his last meal, Lou made the riskiest decision of his career. Instead of arresting the boy and following standard protocol, Lou decided to follow him discreetly after they ate. He knew Wei would lead him straight to his captors, and then he could dismantle the entire criminal operation. But Wei wasn't stupid. He had survived 2 years on the streets by developing sharper instincts than most adults. He realized Lou was following him, and instead of leading him back to the Golden Crows, he did something no one expected. He hid in an alley and confronted the officer. "Why are you following me?" he asked, with a voice that sounded far too old for his small body. Lou was stunned by the forced maturity in those 8-year-old eyes. At that moment, he made the most important decision of his life. He told the boy the full truth. "Because I think you're in danger, Wei. 'Cause I believe someone is hurting you. And because I can't go home to my son knowing you're suffering on the street." Wei was silent for several minutes that felt like hours. Finally, with real tears running down his cheeks, he told Lou everything. The abductions, the training, the brutal punishments when he failed a mission, the other kids who had disappeared when they were no longer useful. Lou knew he had 2 options. Follow official protocol, which could take months, during which Wei would be in mortal danger, or act on his own and risk his career and even his freedom. He didn't hesitate for a second. That same night, Lou organized an undercover operation with 3 trusted colleagues. Using the information Wei had given him, they surrounded the building where the Golden Crows kept the children. The raid was fast and brutal. 12 criminals arrested, 18 children rescued, and a criminal network that had operated for 5 years was finally dismantled. But the hardest part came after the rescue. Wei was so traumatized he couldn't trust any adult, including Lou. For weeks at the rehabilitation center, the boy would hide under beds, hoard food like it might vanish, and have nightmares so intense he woke up screaming in languages he had learned to trick tourists. Lou visited Wei every day after his shift. Not as a cop, but as the man who had decided this boy would never be abandoned again. He brought him books, taught him how to read properly, and above all, showed him day after day that not all adults were dangerous. The adoption process took 8 months of legal battles, but Lou and his wife eventually succeeded in making Wei a part of their family. The boy who had once been human bait now had a younger brother, loving parents, and, for the first time in his life, a future full of possibilities. But did you know this story has a twist no one saw coming? In the years that followed, Wei transformed from a victim into a model student. His ability to read people, developed during his time on the streets, made him an exceptional psychology student. He graduated high school with the highest grades in his class and earned a full scholarship to study criminology at Beijing University. In 2021, Wei graduated with honors and made a decision that shocked everyone. He returned to Guangzhou to become a police officer, specifically to specialize in rescuing trafficked children. But Lou had been transferred to another city years earlier, and they gradually lost contact. Now 21, Wei had tried to find the man who saved his life, but changes in the police department and bureaucratic reshuffling had erased many records. In September 2023, after 2 years of intense searching, Wei finally found a lead. Liu Zhengming was now working as an instructor at the Shanghai Police Academy. He had been promoted for his outstanding work in juvenile cases. Ironically, inspired by rescuing Wei, they reunited at a small cafe near the academy. Liu, now 44 with silver hair, didn't recognize the young professional who approached his table. But when Wei said, "Hi, Dad Liu, it's Zhang Wei," the veteran officer's eyes filled with tears he'd held in for 9 years. "My little Wei," Liu whispered, hugging the young man who now towered over him. "I knew you'd do something extraordinary with your life." What Wei discovered during that conversation changed his view of everything he had lived through. Lu confessed that rescuing him had not only defined his career, it had given his life purpose. He had risked everything. His job, his reputation, even his freedom, because something deep inside him knew Wei wasn't just another child in trouble. Do you know why I chose you out of all the kids I'd seen in similar situations? Lu asked. Wei shook his head. Because I saw something in your eyes that I recognized instantly. The will to survive. But more than that, I saw kindness. Despite everything you'd been through, there was still goodness in you. Wei told Lu about his career, the 47 children he had personally rescued in 2 years as a specialist officer, the new protocols he had created based on his own experiences as a victim. Lu listened with a mix of fatherly pride and professional awe. But the biggest surprise came when Lu showed him something he had kept for 9 years. A journal documenting every day of Wei's rescue and adoption. I wrote it all down, he said, because I knew one day your story would inspire others. I knew your pain wouldn't be in vain. That journal is now the foundation of a national training program for officers specializing in child rescues. Wei's story has been featured at international conferences on human trafficking and has inspired changes to child protection laws across China. Today, in 2025, Wei leads his own specialized unit in Guangzhou, the same city where he was once used as bait. His team has rescued over 200 children and dismantled 15 criminal networks. But more importantly, he created a revolutionary protocol, training survivors like himself to help identify and rescue other children in similar situations. Lu, for his part, retired last year, but continues to volunteer as a consultant in difficult cases. He says Wei taught him the most important lesson of his entire career. Sometimes, saving a life isn't about following rules. It's about following your heart and trusting that the universe has a bigger plan than we can see. The relationship between Wei and Lu has evolved, from rescued and rescuer to colleagues and finally to true father and son. Wei named Lu the godfather of his first child, born last year. The circle has closed in the most beautiful way possible. Wei's story teaches us that even in the darkest moments of life, guardian angels appear when we least expect them. It shows us that trauma can become purpose, that victims can become heroes, and that one single act of courage can change not just one life, but spark a wave of change that touches thousands. But above all, it reminds us that we are never truly alone. There is always someone willing to risk everything to do what's right, someone who sees our worth when we can't see it ourselves. Now I want to hear your story. Have you ever witnessed an act of courage that changed someone's life? Or maybe you've been that guardian angel to someone without even realizing it. Share your experience in the comments. I love reading about those moments when humanity shines at its purest. These stories remind me why it's still worth believing in people.